when you've got a traumatized brain, the neocortex jumps out, the limbic system jumps out, the emotional, and all you're left with is the desire to do the fight, flight, and freeze. You can't think straight. You can't operate. The way that somatic experience therapy works is finding where that block is, understanding what meaning you attribute to the block and what emotions you attribute and what it makes you want to do. And by releasing it from your system, then you're able to function as normal. We build what's called the healing vortex, and that acts like a anchor for all the negative feelings and symptoms in the body. What we do is we go to a happy place, and then their whole body just starts to slow down and melt. I do use EMDR. The way that we measure it is just how you feel, just noticing the lack of tension in your body and noticing how the symptoms are going away.
This is Hope to Recharge. I'm Atana. I'm here to guide you and support you through your challenging times, navigating through depression, anxiety, and other mental health struggles. Thank you for joining me here today with Micki, marriage and family counselor, therapist in Israel, but originally from America. She traveled around the world. I came across her because someone posted. It's amazing how I always find the people that exactly I need at that moment. I've been researching about somatic therapy, and it was one of the only, I think, modalities of therapy that I've been curious about, but I never tried it on myself. And my audience know that I tried almost everything from holistic Buddhist traditions and holistic, the more religious part of it. And I tried traditional therapy and psychotherapy. I tried it all, right? Medicine, off medicine. But somatic, I never tried. And recently, a friend of mine, I think it was a few weeks ago, that told me that she was going through actually a very hard divorce. And she was saying that 2 years ago, she was looking into somatic, and now she was thinking of actually becoming a somatic practitioner. And I'm like, what is it?
Wow.
So I was researching, and I know I heard a lot about it. And I have a friend that speaks about it often. And I reached out to her and I'm like, so what's somatic? How does it work? And when somebody posted that you help them with somatic, but you're a family therapist, you do
Family,
marriage,
sex,
family, sex, intimacy. You also a
and trauma and
trauma,
relationship
relationship
coaching.
coach for pre-marriage or post-marriage, how to not get stuck, all these things.
Correct.
You deal with all these issues, right? Communication
Yeah.
issues, individual
Mhm.
issues of identity versus a couple. And then I said, "Oh my God, this is fascinating. Like, how do we use somatic to come into therapy as a couples therapist?" So, Mickey,
Yeah.
thank you for joining me here. It was
Thank you.
fascinating to read that post, how you did a somatic treatment on somebody for the war, for their anxiety about the war.
It was a
And
15-minute session. I could share a little bit about it with you.
yeah, yeah. So, first of all, welcome and thank you for being
Thank
here.
you. I'm ready to launch right in there.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. Basically, a woman that I know who's a dear friend of mine and I were talking, and she was just like fading out. She was just like, her head was all over the place. I said, look, I can't have a conversation with you like this. I have to do some SE on you. SE is for short for somatic experience therapy. I said, I need to SE this. And literally, we did a 15-minute session, and she was clear as she was like a whole new person. She was
Mm.
just, and she also told me the next day, and she posted this on that group, on the iWin group, that she had her first good night's sleep in 20 days or something, whatever day it was
Since the war began.
or began.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which a lot of people are not sleeping or with anxiety and
Yeah.
fear. Will they have to run to the shelter? What's going to be the endless worries and anxiety that's just
Yeah.
living in Israel? Is she
The
living in
world's gonna
Israel?
look like. Yeah, she is. She's living in
She
Israel.
is
She is.
living in Israel.
Yeah.
So I want so let's before we dive into your work, I want to understand the basic definition of somatic.
The basic definition of somatic. So, al regel achat, as they say in Israel, on one foot. Basically, the the way that it works is like this. Let's say your brain. Okay, I'll use my hand. Right.
Hmm.
Let's say this is your brain, and when you experience trauma, what happens is that your reptilian brain is the only part of the brain that's functional. Let's say this is the reptilian part of your brain. This is the limbic system, the emotional part. This is the neocortex up here. So this is the way it's supposed to sit. But what happens when you've got a traumatized brain is the neocortex jumps out, the limbic system jumps out, the emotional, and all you're left with is the desire to do the fight, flight, and freeze. And that's connected to the central nervous system. And that impacts the way that your whole body's functioning. And so that means that you can't think straight. You can't operate in the best way that you can. And the way that somatic experience therapy works is I call it human plumbing. It's about finding where the block is inside of your body. It's going to be in one
Mm,
of your organs that are going to be affected, right? The organs will go into hyper functioning or hypo functioning. They'll overfunction, underfunction, right? And that's what makes your whole body get out of whack. That's what
mm.
makes you eat more or eat less, or high sex drive, low sex drive. Your heart rate will increase, your lung capacity will go down. Everything just goes completely out of whack. And then that affects your whole way of being and thinking about yourself. And so the way that somatic experience works is it's by finding where that block is, understanding what meaning you attribute to the block and what emotions you attribute and what it makes you want to do. And by releasing it from your
Mm.
system, then you're able to function as normal. It's really that simple and it's
And
quick.
what's the technique? So you said like it's a plumbing. So with plumbing you
Yeah.
use Drano or
So it's plumbing
so what
Eustrano.
is it? How does it
So
work? Like how do we
okay,
sounds like a magic pillow. I have a migraine,
it
take Motrin and it
it
goes
it is
away.
magical. It is magical, and by the way, I don't really take too much headache pills anymore. I don't take too many headache pills anymore because to try to SE when I do get a headache, and it happens a lot less, so it's been happening a little bit more since the war,
Mhm.
I SE it. I have a pain, I SE
Is that
it.
what it's called?
Then
I SC it? Is that the
I
terminology?
me personally, I
Yeah.
SE the pain. Yeah, that's how we say it in SE
Mm,
land, in somatic
mm,
experience therapy land.
okay.
I had a crazy experience this summer where I was trying to swing on a rope. I fell on my back.
Mm,
My back should have been broken or something,
mm.
but somehow I know how to sort of calm my nervous system down when I'm in like a crazy situation. And I was able to just breathe through it. I fell on rocks, by the
Oh
way.
my
I fell on a lot of, it was painful. It definitely
God.
hurt, but what I did was I just really focused on my body and I just allowed myself to just imagine the pain just going away. And I just created my own corrective experience. I'll explain to you a bit how it works. So let's say we could do it on you right now
Yeah,
if you want.
let's
Do you have
go.
pain in your body? Are you up
I'm
for it?
so I want to know how you start. So let's say someone comes to
Okay,
you
I'll go
and
through.
says, "Let's go through an experience." I'll say to you, "I'm feeling very triggered. I'm feeling very nervous because
Yeah,
I haven't heard from my family member that's in war.
in the war.
Let's
Yeah,
say they're at war. I haven't heard from them and
right.
I can't breathe properly. I can't focus. I'm going to take the war because
Yes.
it's on the mind of everyone right now and
Yes.
people can relate to it. And I'm not functioning. I'm just not
Yeah.
functioning.
Okay. So I would want to know a little bit more about what this not functioning is, but we wouldn't even have to talk too much about it. And usually the person comes in, they say they have these symptoms, they're not eating right, or they're not sleeping, or they're nauseous, or whatever it is. What we do is we build what's called the healing vortex, and that acts like a anchor for all the negative feelings and symptoms in the body. And what we do is we go to a happy place. I'll get you nice and grounded. We'll do some ventral vagal exercises, get the neck nice and loose and everything like that. And you'll sit with your feet on the ground and you'll make sure that your body, I'm like sitting the way that, that I would
Yeah.
tell anybody
Yeah.
to sit in my office. And I just try to get their breath to slow down. I'll get them to think of a nice happy place that they might go to. I might even put on some sound of some rushing waves or some sound of rain or something like that. Or they'll make maybe even I use some weighted blankets. Got one
Mm,
right here. And I might
no.
put this in their lap and it
Mm.
like makes them like calm down. I have a whole bunch of toys here. I use like some poppets. I got some rocks. My favorite rock is this one from Eilat. It's this really it looks like a potato, but
Oh,
it's
wow.
really
It
nice
does.
and it's nice and cool. And you might hold it in your hands. And you just all these different things will just calm you down. I also spray my room up really nicely with a lot of lavender and different nice smells. Actually got this smell from this very lovely scent from iHerb called Peace,
Mm.
ironically.
Mhm.
And it really makes you feel really peaceful inside. And so I'll just bring that person to the happy place. And then their whole body just starts to slow down and melt into the couch or into the chair. And then once we bring in the happy place, I'll invite them to think about this. Either they'll tell me a little bit about their fear, that might tell me about the person that they're afraid of, that they're maybe afraid that maybe something happened to them, or they're afraid that they don't know where they are, they're whatever it is, whatever the fear might be. Or I might even just go straight in the body and I might say, as you're sitting here, what part of your body is bothering you? Where do you notice some sort of tension in your body? They might say, I have some tension in my chest or my shoulders or my back or their stomach. And I'll get them to focus on it and notice it. And I'll say, as you're noticing the tension, is there a color, a shape, a texture? Is there some sort of meaning or image or memory that comes up for you? Does it remind you of something? Is there sort of emotion connected to the feeling? Does it make you want to do something? And a client that I was working with recently, who was in a bomb shelter with somebody that really triggered her, was she just went through all this with me.
What
And
if
it just,
nothing comes up? What if there's no color, no shape, no thought? What if it's just pain and I'm
yeah,
not and I'm not
right.
getting to all these things?
That does happen sometimes. And so it gets a little complex. That would be called an uncoupled memory. There's coupled memories, which means that it's sitting on the trauma is sitting on a
Mm.
lot of different other traumas or even
Mm.
several different traumas, or it's an uncoupled trauma, meaning that we don't know what it's connected to. Right? And so we help that person make some sort of connection. And there's a lot of different ways that in which I would work with that. It'd take too long to really go through all of that. But yeah, that does happen. And so I might work on the outside of the person's body, meaning I might just help them to just really calm their nervous system down, just to really help them to reconnect with their bodies. And so the more connected a person is with their body, the easier it is. And I've had many clients come to me where they really couldn't connect with their bodies when they first came in, and so we had to do a tremendous amount of calming to build up that healing vortex to reconnect them with their bodies so that they could then access the trauma.
So what happened to this woman that was triggered by the woman in the bomb shelter?
So what I don't want to get into the whole thing, but basically what I got to see was actually that trauma was sitting on a lot of other traumas
Mm.
from her past.
Mm.
And so we fixed that trauma in 5 seconds because because she got to me very quickly, and that's really the key with trauma is you don't a lot of people put off dealing with their traumas, and they say, "I'll deal with it later, I'll deal with it later." I have a sad story of a lovely chayal that I was treating from Sukeitan, the war before this one, which was in 2014.
A khayal means a soldier. There's
Soldier,
some
sorry.
people that don't understand Hebrew.
Of course,
Okay.
of course. Yes, a lovely soldier, and I knew his mom, and I said to her, I knew that her son had been in combat, and
Mm.
I said, "Please make sure that your son comes to me straight away." And she really pleaded with her son to come, and he just wouldn't. And he came 2 years later, 2 years after the war was over. And the PTSD had really taken a hold of him to
Mm.
such a big extent that it was really hard. It took a lot longer to treat. Whereas he come straight after, it's easy to say after the fact, but I really believe that we would have really treated him, he would have been in a much, much better way. But what happens is when we don't treat trauma straight away, it just develops it morphs into all different sorts of meanings and different things. And it really stops us from living our fullest lives.
Wow, I have so many questions.
Um,
No, I want to understand it. I want to understand it before I
yeah,
go deep into our conversation.
sure.
So, when you say you release the trauma, somebody with like that does EMDR, so they could
Yeah,
say you don't necessarily feel the release, but you know that when you look at the trauma, it's not at that intensity. It's that we
right.
remember it, but it's not intense. How do
Right. It won't
you
be a 10,
measure
it'll be a 5.
right? So, how
Yeah.
do
And we
you
do that in
measure it?
SC2
You do the same
sometimes.
thing?
We are not so big on the numbers. It's more like a general, we look more SE looks more in the body than EMDR. I studied them both actually, and I do use EMDR. I use a lot of EMDR techniques as well. So, like I do the butterfly tapping
Mhm.
sometimes as well, which SE and EMDR use that in parallel with each other. But the way that we measure it is just how you feel, just noticing the lack of tension in your body and noticing how the symptoms are going away. That's the proof is in the pudding. You just see the symptoms just melting away. You see how the person, for instance, with a friend I worked with 20 days into the war who was having trouble with sleeping, and was very foggy, you could tell 2 seconds after I treated her that she was able to focus. You could tell that the fog had lifted,
Hmm.
right? It's really that simple.
But so let me give you another scenario. Let's say
Sure.
somebody knows they have a trauma, but when they're coming to you, they're not
Mhm.
triggered by it. They're not really feeling it anywhere, but they know they
Absolutely.
have to work on it. So I'm going to take an
Yeah.
example from the Orthodox and not Orthodox world, something that I see often and I hear often.
Mm.
A very Orthodox couple gets married, and the
Mhm.
first night of sex is a trigger because they
Yes.
feel either raped,
Shame.
violated, shame, unfamiliar, the list goes on and on.
Right.
And it's not because something specific happened, it's the unknown. It was a trauma. You
Right.
go and then they start going into therapy and they understand that they don't even know that it's the first night or the first year or the first 2 years or whatever. They don't know that's the trigger
Yeah.
of the
Sure. I've seen that a
of
lot.
the trauma, right? You've seen it a lot. Most
I've
sex
seen
therapists say
people
it, right? We
20 years
we hear
after.
it a lot, right?
Yeah.
Sure where it is. They know that there's a trauma. And then they're like, okay,
Right.
fine. They just come to you as a couple and they're like, okay, we have to
Mhm.
work on our sex and intimacy and it comes
Yes.
up, but they're not feeling it strong in the moment of you bringing it up. How do you address it if it's not? But then the night, let's say she goes to the mikvah, the break between the physical intimacy for 2 weeks, and then goes to the mikvah and she feels that trauma in her body,
Yeah.
but
She'll
she's
feel
not
the
in the
trauma.
office then.
Yeah, but she'll be able to report to me. People that I've worked with will often what will often happen is they'll report that they have painful sex. Come up as vaginismus or stabilitis or something like that, where there's like a tension in the vagina,
Mm, mm,
and anytime he tries to come in, her body goes into the freeze and it can't loosen up.
mm.
And so we work through that. And sometimes I'll do some individual sessions with the woman or the man, whoever's experiencing whatever the issue is. And sometimes we'll do it all together,
Mm.
depending on what's needed, whether she feels she can do it safely in front of her partner or vice versa.
So you can
Yeah, that's
treat
what
it
we do.
even if you're not like feeling that emotion, that intensity in your office. This episode is sponsored by our incredible sponsor from the beginning, BetterHelp.com. That's BetterHelp.com, the leading online platform for therapy. Many people come to me for help, and one of my questions are, have you been to therapy? Are you willing to go to therapy? I am not a therapist. I don't claim to be a therapist, and I don't do the therapist work. And I think it's something that has to be done with a therapist side by side. Some people have been to therapy for many years and then they come to me to do the work. I often say if you haven't been to therapy and if you want to start working with me, you need to start working with a therapist as well. Very often, it is very expensive. BetterHelp is a leading online platform for therapy that is affordable. You don't have to leave your house. You can get it from the comfort of your sofa, your bed, your office. It's one click away. There are thousands of licensed clinicians on this platform. It's incredible. If you want to get 10% off your first month, use the link in the show notes, betterhelp.com/hope to recharge. Use the link below and start your therapy from the comfort of your home. Sometimes it's so overwhelming to go to therapy. Nowadays, most therapists are on Zoom. Most clinicians are on Zoom. Let's say you travel a lot. Let's say you just don't like getting out of your house, but you want a therapist. It's so affordable. It's worth taking a look. If you're thinking about therapy and you don't know where to start, go to betterhelp.com/hope to recharge. That's betterhelp.com/hope to recharge. Millions of people from all over the world are using them. Start your wellness now.
If we bring it up. We bring it up through either through talking or just she'll sharing the symptoms. She'll tell me about the symptoms and then it'll just come up. And then
Mm.
we'll just go in there and then different memories will come up. And a lot of memories have come up for people that they didn't realize they were holding on to. They didn't realize 10 years later that the issue really did come up from their first sexual encounter or just seeing their partner naked has been traumatic for some people, not realizing what male anatomy really looked like and stuff
Mm.
like that.
So,
Yeah.
why was it important to you after you became a marriage and family therapist and
Mhm.
sex therapist to actually go into the somatic field? What did you think that was
Yeah.
missing in your practice that you said, I can take it a little deeper and it's important, and you feel a huge shift with your couples that you work with?
Yeah, it just so many of the issues that came up. I just see trauma all over the place, sadly. And when I'm talking about trauma, also, we're not always talking about big T traumas. We're not always talking about rapes or murders or huge things like that. Sometimes it's even just little simple things that we're just shaming as a child. Sometimes being yelled at by a parent or a teacher that could really get into a person's kishkas and it could really kill a person's self-esteem. And then it could really wreak havoc with being able to form a relationship. I have lots of clients who tell me that, and brilliant people, by the way, absolutely. Sometimes it's the smarter ones that have more trouble because they even try to overcompensate in some ways. But they often will tell me that they just feel uncertain about themselves. They feel lack of self esteem, lack of self confidence. And then this lack of self esteem and confidence, then they project outwards and they feel they can't find anybody lovable enough. But what they're really doing is they're feeling that there's a lack of lovability inside of them. And so they create this sort of boundary between themselves and others. and they don't allow themselves to really connect with other people. I see so many people who have trouble with intimacy and attraction because of past trauma. And so then they'll come to my office. And so that's really what inspired me, just seeing this again and again. I said, and I just wasn't getting anywhere just with talking to
So
them.
talk therapy wasn't really going deep to
Wasn't
healing the
cutting it.
trauma.
It wasn't cutting it. And I just didn't want to charge people to just sit in my office and talk and get nowhere. And
Mm.
one of the things that I learned when I studied somatic experience therapy with Gina Ross more than 13 years ago was that sometimes talking about it actually compounds it and makes it even worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's
Whereas
bringing it alive.
it's making it alive and it needs to release. And if you can't release it, it just stays in your body even more. And then you feel even more frustrated. And then where are you?
Mm.
Right? And so by doing it in a somatic way, you're actually able to really release the trauma from the body, and then you're able to really do what you need to do.
Are you saying that every trauma attaches itself to a part of our body, guaranteed? It's not only in our mind and in our emotion?
Our mind is connected to our body, and it certainly seems that way. It certainly seems that our body is really the reptilian brain is really where we hold all those subconscious memories. And it's definitely the memory. It's what Bessel van der Kolk said, the body keeps the score. He,
Right.
I think, is the one who originated that
Right.
terminology. It's
Right.
really that way. And so I don't even know anymore how to not use the body in
Wow.
healing the clients. I don't know.
So it's like a fast forward.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
thinking of Monopoly, like you can go ahead, like you can
yeah.
go step by step, or you could just skip ahead.
It
And
is like that. And people tell me all the time they feel like therapy using SE is like 5 years of therapy rolled into one.
wow.
It's so intense.
Is
You just
there
get
so yeah.
you just get straight to the point. You don't have to fluff around and develop huge attachments to the therapist or anything like that. You just get right in there. And the other thing that's great for the therapists out there listening to this, is that you could work so much, you could do so much more work because you don't take on the trauma as much. Because when you hear it's hearing the stories, right?
Mm,
Trauma also enters the ears, it enters the
mm,
eyes. Because I'm not hearing the story so much, I'm
mm.
able to really create more of a buffer between myself and the client, and I don't feel traumatized by it
So
anymore. And
there's
also,
no analyzing the detailing of it? There's no really analyzing?
I don't, it doesn't get into my kishkas in the same way. I'm also able to clear my system afterwards. I used to be, anybody who knows me from 20 years ago, I used to bucket like anything. I would just hear a sad story. It was really hard for me when I was working with clients
Mm.
because I would get so sad. I would get really into the material that they were sharing with me, and I would
A huge
really,
empath.
yes, I'm a huge empath,
Yeah.
exactly. And I really think, oh my God, am I going to be able to help this person? I get so sad. And now I think I'm not, I barely cry, not because I'm not sensitive, not because I'm not empathetic, but because I feel so confident in my ability to heal people. And I've seen so many amazing miracles
Mm.
in such a short period of time. And I'm not sad anymore because I'm able to feel so hopeful.
You're enthusiastic.
Fantastic. I
And
see
you're
the
happy for them because you feel that it's going to pass through and you have the tools
possibility.
to help them do that. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Is there controversy in the healing world, in the therapist world, in the doctor world on somatic? I'm curious to know.
So there definitely was early on when there wasn't a lot of research because there's, a lot of the CBT therapists in particular, they love to quote that CBT has got all the research. And SE took a little bit longer for the research to come out. And now a lot of research has come out. So now people can't say there's not enough research. That's number one. Number two, what we're seeing now, and this is really killing me, is a lot of the therapists on the front lines, the psychologists on the front lines of the war, weren't all treated in SE. Many of them were not. And so there's a controversy between the old school psychodynamic therapists and the CBT therapists and the SE therapists. And so the old school therapists, let's call them, are saying, wait till the soldiers are
War
out of the
is
war.
over.
Let that adrenaline just go through their body and
Right.
let them use that adrenaline to just kill the enemy. And they need that adrenaline. But what the SE therapists know, because they're much more knowledgeable about how the body works and the brain and the connection between the two, they're saying that what happens is there are soldiers who've been sitting around waiting to go to fight for a very long time. So maybe the first 2 days, 3 days, maybe the first week, they were really pumped and excited, and adrenaline was going through the body. But we're up to day 37 now, I think. That adrenaline has gone truly out of their system, and now the fear is kicking in. and they need to
And
deal with that, of course.
exhaustion from
Yes.
anxiety, lack of normal sleeping, like just
Sleeping in
the
a
just being
tent,
in a tent, cold, hot, not
barely
knowing where the next
showering.
and or just the daily routine of not if somebody's used to being in school and work or a father or whatever, they don't have that normal day to day. It
Yeah,
catches up. And
absolutely.
besides the news and whatever, like
And their
the
friends being
drama. Yeah.
murdered, all of
Mm.
it. And so the old school psychologists are saying you should just wait around for them for the adrenaline to go through their system and whatever. But the problem is that once the fear kicks in, it makes the person weaker. And if a person is weaker, if our soldiers are weaker, then they can't do what they need to do. They literally can go into the freeze or the shutdown mode. They're not in a fight mode anymore.
2
And so
years ago,
that's
they had
why,
therapists in the army. Think
of
about this is new to think that there's so
course.
many therapists with technology that can access
Yeah.
who could have accessed a base 20 years ago or
Yeah.
even
No,
10
they didn't
years
have.
ago? Who
Even the
accessed a
last war, even
yeah,
the
they
last
had
war, I
a
don't think they
maybe they
had.
had a psychologist or a social worker, but to have the abundance that we have now is just to have this conversation is curious.
Yeah,
Wow, it just shows what modern days do that there's even a conversation of how to help soldiers heal before, during, and after.
on the front line in real time. Yeah, yeah,
Mm,
absolutely, absolutely.
wow, that's fascinating. So
Mhm.
where is these conversation happening of the therapist?
Oh, we have a group. I'm actually missing it right now, sadly, but it's more important that I'm
I'm
talking to
sorry.
you. No, it's okay. We've been having supervision groups every Thursday evening between 6 and 8 p.m. The SE community run by Gina Ross. Gina Ross is sitting all the way in LA, and thank God for Zoom. She's doing group supervision with all of us, and we're all learning from each other and sharing different things that are coming up for us every week.
Mm.
Yeah, every week since the start of the war.
And are you volunteering with the
Yes.
army? How does it work? Like, how does
So,
somebody how do these bases get therapists? Like, what is it?
so
What's a
there are a
protocol?
lot of psychologists who do are employed through the army.
Mm,
Me personally, I have been doing my own volunteer work. I've been volunteering through Jerusalem City of Gold, which has been housing different people from the South, finding different houses around Jerusalem for people from the South, people who have been very generous and donating their homes. Let's say people who live in America, Australia, whatever, England, and they've been donating their homes to people from the South. And those people have been very traumatized. And so some people who've been working with them and volunteering with them know me and they've been calling me up and saying, "Hey, this person lives right near you. Can you just pop over to them or can they pop over to you and can you do some work with them?" And so
mm.
I've had some beautiful sessions and it's so lovely that I'm able to work with them right after the
Wow.
trauma. I had
So
a
beautiful.
gorgeous Can I just share I just want to share one
Please.
experience.
I'm
I
in
worked with these
awe. I'm in awe. Like I have tears.
so
Like
it's
what
very
an act of
exciting.
service. I share so
It's healing for
often.
me too.
Exactly. Simon Sinek
Yeah.
says the greatest
Yeah.
act of service is serving those that serve others. And he
Yeah.
says this all the
Yeah.
time. And it stuck
Yeah.
with me. And he shares an experience when he went to, I think it was Afghanistan or whatever, and he felt honored. And he said
Yeah.
there's like this incredible humility to be able to serve those that serve others.
So let me share the story. I'm working with this woman from Nativot down in the south. They were one of the first communities that were hit by Hamas, and they were actually hit a lot less, fortunately, for whatever reason. We don't know why. But nevertheless, they got they heard the terrorists going through the community, and there was tremendous amount of fear as they're sitting in their safe rooms. And so this young woman, I think she's even pregnant. I'm not sure. I haven't even asked her, but she looks very young and she looks like she's a little bit like early on in her pregnancy, not quite sharing yet. And she has three young children, 6, 4, and 2. And she comes to me and she says, "Look, I can't sleep at night. I don't feel like I have the ability to protect my children." And so she came, we did some SE, and basically what happened was she she was in her house and she heard this very loud boom on her house, like on this, like there was
Mm.
this aluminum
Oh
just
my God.
outside the window, and she didn't know
Oh
where
my.
this boom came from.
Yeah.
And she thought a terrorist had just jumped on this
Yes.
metal thing, and she had no idea what the heck it was. They found out later it was a stupid cat that was running around, but it
Mm.
scared the Jesus
Right.
out of them.
Right.
And so basically, and this fear got really trapped inside of her body to the point where she was literally paralyzed. And she said to
Mm.
her husband, "If I have to grab our children and do something, I'm not going to be able to do it." And she felt like a complete failure as a
Mm.
parent. to
Mm,
protect her children.
mm.
And so we worked through that, BSE that, and then it comes time to, I didn't get to share this part with you, to do this thing called creating a corrective experience. That's the very end. And that's the icing on the cake of SE. And basically what that is, it's being able to say, okay, you've discharged all the trauma from your body. Now let's implant a positive thing. If you could go back to that time, and it's hard to go back to that time, but now that you've released all the trauma, you can go back to that time and imagine there's a terrorist right outside of your.
Oh my God. I don't even know how someone can imagine that.
Well, she could easily imagine it because
Oh,
that was the situation, so it's not too far beyond her imagination.
oh my God.
So if you imagine that, what would you like to imagine happening differently? What sort of
Oh,
scenario would you like to come up with to help you feel stronger? And the scenario that she came up with was she would like to imagine that her whole family became see-through and that the terrorists came in and that they didn't see them. And then that God brought down this huge fireball and killed all the terrorists and prevented them from killing anybody else. And just this creative thought gave her this huge feeling of joy. And I know it sounds crazy to the person who's just hearing this and not experiencing it. It's you're telling me that I'm just going to trick my brain and pretend that this
not
crazy.
only that, it's not reality because it won't be
Right,
see-through. I'm saying, isn't that
right,
dangerous to even bring an idea that's not possible? She won't be, if a terrorist comes, she's not see-through. She needs to act. What is it
right.
doing to my
So
brain by faking it?
the thing is like this, because she's not now currently
Mm,
in a dangerous situation, we
mm,
can play with those sorts of things.
mm.
Because what we need to do is we need to get her feeling strong again. So we could use any sort of
So it
corrective,
doesn't matter.
creative.
It doesn't
It
matter
doesn't
what
matter.
story she says, that she's not
Right,
even there. They were in a
right.
different state. They were like somewhere
I'll give
else.
you
And
exactly, and I'll give you another scenario, and this is not a scenario I dealt with. This is something that was brought up in supervision with Gina, this SE supervision, where a soldier was saying that he felt very scared of losing his life, and the way that you deal with that is because that is a real scenario. You can't just say no. You just imagine you're not going to die. Imagine
right,
everything's going to go well. Imagine Hamas,
right.
whatever. So you really help them deal with that reality, and you say, what would happen if you did survive, or what would happen if you don't fight? What would happen if you don't go in and fight? Right? What are the different possible scenarios? If you don't go and fight,
To
if
give
these
yourself a
soldiers,
way out.
if you give yourself a way out, how would you feel if you don't? What might happen to your family members? Let's say the whole Israeli army decides that they don't have the ability to fight right now. Let's say they all feel too weak to fight right now. What would happen? What would happen is we'd be overrun by our enemy. That's what would happen.
So what happens when they have that thought? What if we can't fight the enemy?
If I can't fight the enemy, then what would happen to your family members? What would happen to the rest of the Jewish nation? If we were too weak and we allowed ourselves to be overrun by the enemy, then the enemy would be able to harm everybody and they would knock us all out. And so by working in that sort of way, it helps to bolster and strengthen the soldier, knowing how important they are and how important their mission is. And there's something about knowing that, and I've spoken to other soldiers like this as well, who really feel that they have to do this. They have this huge mission and they're not scared of giving their life for this because they know that if they don't, the Jewish world won't exist. And they feel such a huge debt of responsibility
Yeah,
towards
responsibility.
people.
I feel if I'm looking at
Yeah.
a room full of therapists, I feel like they would have a hard time with this inner dialogue. It's so non-traditional.
Yeah. I definitely did in the beginning too.
And it's in time of war, we're using these scenarios, and I'm thinking like, wow, maybe the thing is that what I found in my
Yeah.
healing is that you traditional path and it works to for many or to a certain way, and then you want just deeper and you're willing to even consider things that you think are radical. And no, my husband said nonsensical is not a word, but my father said it is a word. So he's a thesaurus. Even the nonsensical. And I remember when I was debilitated with depression and anxiety, I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't swallow. I couldn't shower on my own. There was not 10 minutes
Yeah.
without a panic attack.
Oh,
And I did the medicine and I did the therapy. And at a certain time, I said, you know what? I don't care anymore. I don't care if you tell me to say backwards the ABC standing on my
and that's
head
gonna work.
and wearing a pink shoe on on one foot and a black on another foot and split, and that's gonna
Yeah.
work, I will try it. I
Yeah.
remember trying the different potions, and I often say to people, not everything is gonna
Yeah.
work all the way, but maybe it's gonna take you 5% further. Maybe it's gonna
Yeah.
open something for 10%. I'm listening to you and I'm like, wow, the traditional therapy probably
Yeah.
I don't know how they deal with this, but I do know how somatic is so
Yeah. It
popular and
works.
it work and I hear
And
so many
quickly.
stories. I personally hear so many stories of
Yeah.
unbelievable miracles. I had a friend that had
Yeah.
terrible stomach issues
Yeah.
for years. They thought it was gluten and then they thought it's dairy and then they thought it was parasite. She did somatic and she
Yeah.
didn't believe in all this stuff. And she's like, okay, you just get to a point that you just say, okay, I'm willing to try it. And I say, maybe it's going to work and maybe it's not going to work. How many times do we go to therapy for 2 years and we're like, okay, we're in the same spot.
Right.
It's not working. I didn't get anything out of it. I'm just thinking like the dream
Yeah.
of the war, like it's
Yeah.
a heavy topic. It's really a
Yeah.
heavy topic, the war. And to think that I'm inspired that soldiers are
Yeah.
using it and they're
The other thing,
compelled to try it.
I'll give you
I'm
another thing I'm
inspired.
doing I'm doing this on a volunteer basis as well, is I created a support group for parents of soldiers. I've only done one session so far. I've been doing other groups.
Zoom?
Actually, it's the Nature Museum invited me to come and do it. A friend of mine runs a nature museum, Shulamit Dayan. The
Mm,
way that it happened was her son is one of the first combat soldiers to go into Be'eri. He's been in a tremendous amount of combat, so she's
mm,
been very stressed. And I said, Shulamit, I need to do some work on you.
mm,
And she was, no, I don't. I said, let's do a group. Let's do it with a group. So we got a group of women together. Actually, there was a husband there as well, a father as well. We got a group of people together, all of whom have children who are in combat right now. And sitting right next to her was another mother of a boy who is fighting in exactly the same battalion. Exactly the same battalion. Yeah,
wow.
crazy. And it was so healing for them. It was so healing for them to go through the scenario. And it's touching each of them in a different way. Each of them are taking this war in different places and it's hitting on different aspects from their previous life. So it's not just about healing
Mm,
stuff in the war, it's also healing stuff, feeling feelings of I'm not a good enough parent, or a lot of that's coming up right now, or even a birth trauma came up from this other mother was sharing about
mm,
how it's a memory from when she gave birth to her son and different things about that she hadn't healed. It's so deep. It is so deep and so
mm,
amazing, the stuff that comes up
mm.
and the stuff that gets healed. And people were walking out of there. We only did it like an hour and 15-minute session. It was supposed to be an hour and a half. We did it so fast. It was so fast.
Really? And each one did
I
their
got
own
each
body
one
part wherever
in
they
their own
feel it.
process.
So you went through the
It was only
whole
it
group
was only about five
individually?
people that time, so it went really fast. But
Mm,
each one took it to their own place, and they
right.
just all brought up their own stuff, and doing it in a collective group is just so powerful because you don't feel alone. You just don't feel alone.
Mm.
Doing it individually is also very powerful because you're also giving testimony to the therapist, but doing with other people who you know are going through a similar experience is just compounded. So compounded. It's just incredible.
Mm. So we jumped into the war, but you had a private
I know,
practice
it's hard to
before
believe,
the
right?
war and before COVID.
Before it's
Before that,
23 years.
we're talking about extreme times and extreme, even circumstance, individual trauma, and something that needs like that. It's not just, oh, if I'm not going to heal, come back in a week or so. Like this is big stuff. I want to combine two issues. So, one of the things that you do is work with couples on differences if it's how they lead their life in a spiritual matter. It could be so with children, what way do we want our children to be? They're very divided in that. There's a lot of differences. And I often say we get married thinking we know life, and then life hits us and we think about life. And then we have to just evolve each other and work with each other to
Yeah,
figure things out because we think we know everything, but we really know
nothing.
almost nothing. Life hits, right? And that's okay. And that's
That's
okay.
how we
So
roll.
there's just so much you can prepare beforehand. But as long as you're open minded, when we did a whole series on relationships and marriage and divorce and intimacy, one of the amazing people that I love, and I call her my mentor, was Elisa Bulow. I had her a few times on my podcast. One was discussing her son died by suicide years ago and overcome. She's a
Yeah.
phenomenal human. She's the head of Project Core. Heard of it? It's empowering women to be leaders in their
Mm,
community, in their homes. It's incredible. I might this wrong. I'm not described, but she's a
mm,
phenomenal human being, and I know her personally. She's a convert. She married a guy that was religious. Grew up religious, and after they had a lot of grief
mhm,
in their home, they lost a child and they lost a grandchild. They had a lot
mm.
of pain in their home and in their lives.
Uh,
He left religion. He left religion. He was the traditional lawyer, that like the
I got this
traditional Jewish
question.
lawyer with the and she like have the Torah in the home. And then she became more religious, and he just at a certain point said, I know if God exists, I don't want to be part of who he is, or I don't want to
Yeah.
misquote, but there's a whole episode on it. And one of the things that she shares, which is mind boggling, and I say when I'm is her love, respect, and trust that they have for each
Yeah.
other. That in a marriage, these three things, love, respect, and trust, have to be
Yeah.
in for the marriage, that when things go
Haywire.
separate or issues come up, that it doesn't break the marriage. And she says, like, there
Mm,
is challenges in the relationship, and then it comes up and it's deep. Like when it comes not religious, there's bigger things. There's
mm.
Shabbos, that's kosher. There's Nida. There's family
Right.
purity. All these things that you could, as one is easy to do, but you're in a home. Like, how do you? And I'm blown away by both of them. One of the people that I'm going to interview our next podcast of Listening to Understand is
Oh,
her husband, to understand how he deals with her being more and serving the Orthodox community. And he just
yeah.
admires her to no end and puts
Yeah.
her on a pedestal and celebrates her achievements, even though it has nothing to
Yeah.
do with his beliefs,
Yeah.
opposite of his beliefs. And it's just remarkable. And this love, respect, and
Yeah.
trust that she talks about, and I feel like I need to get better
Yeah.
at it. I need to get it better. And I'm coming full circle to my question. I see it a lot. I see it coming up in my own relationships with people I care about, mentors that I admired, or family members, kids, or I don't speak politics with that much.
Mm.
So it come up there. I don't read the news. I just haven't.
Probably
And
healthier.
we
Right.
have, and we just don't. But if it's a friend or a relative, or even maybe a sibling, and it's vastly different view, and it could be in religion. Now with the war, it's coming up a lot. Why am I bringing it back? Because I feel like with the war, it's not just politics. These are lives. These are lives. This is
Yeah.
this is our future. There's, I believe, right, we're more liberal, less liberal. This is, are we going to die? We're going to more anti-Semitism, less. So how do we deal with these
Yeah.
differences when it's, forget the community people about, I'm saying people that we really deeply care about a lot to us, and we don't want to use this as a
Yeah.
division, like something that will divide or create between us. How do we do that as somebody that's a relationship coach as well as a marriage therapist? How do we do it?
Yeah.
This is just a glimpse of what really happens
Yeah.
often in life, but it's intent to
Intensified. Yeah.
everybody's feeling it. So everybody's like now,
Yeah.
oh, I get that now, right? There's somebody in my life that I don't agree with
Yeah.
when it comes to the war, and it's either triggering or pain.
It's a really hard question.
A
That's a
loaded
really hard
question,
question
right?
because it's not just snap your fingers. It's not as easy as Essie. Let's put it that way. Because here
Right,
you're dealing with two people with two
right.
very vastly different ways of dealing with things.
What are we doing for ourselves? What do we want to be? Do we want to work on? What's important to us? How can we cultivate these small changes in our brain, in our day-to-day life with our own tools? I call working with me the VIP program, because I handhold you through the process, and sometimes the process is very lonely and hard and frustrating, and you want to just make sure you get it right to guide you through it with somebody that went through it. Sometimes you need a therapist, a psychiatrist, a coach, and somebody like me, somebody that went through the same thing, the same same challenge as I did. And I love working with people that are ready to do the work because it is expensive. It's a lifelong investment into yourself, into your future. When you start working with a therapist, with a coach, or with someone like me, you're investing into your long term stability, into your long term mental health. People often ask me, can I work with you? How many times? What does it look like? And I say, it's not about how many times. What are you willing to do to show up, to work on yourself, to make the changes? How ready are you? Because if you're not ready, the investment will go south. You could say, I don't know where I want to go. I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't even believe it can, but I'm no longer willing to stay in this position where I am now. Choose yourself. What are you willing to do to bring awareness to yourself, to your mental health, to your stability, to change? How are you going to impact yourself that you will impact the world? If you want to work one-on-one with me, link is in the show notes. Happy to answer any questions that you have. One-on-one with Matana. Schedule a free 30-minute consultation that we can see if you are ready. Be ready for change. Be ready to work hard. Be ready to see a different you.
Let's say, as an example, one is coming from a more right wing political approach and one is coming from a more left wing political approach. Right now, in a relationship where they both understood that this is how they are, and maybe they didn't even start out that way. Maybe one became more one way or the other as the relationship was going on. But as
Mm.
long as they were talking about it and sharing it and had mutual respect around it, like this Elisa Bulow that you're talking about her husband,
Aliza.
right? As long as you're talking about it and hearing from the other person in a respectful way, then that could really work okay. It's just a matter of saying that you don't hold the goods on which is the right way. The problems come when one person thinks that their way is the right way and the other person's way is the wrong way. As long as you can have space in your head to think that this is my opinion, but maybe I don't hold the goods on my opinion. Maybe my opinion is not the only opinion in the room. Maybe there's some space for somebody else's opinion, then that could work okay. The problems come when either A, the couple has never really talked about their opinions, and all of a sudden you've got this big fat war going on, which is there's so much politics here and there's so many emotions that are rife. And maybe you never thought about your politics before, and all of a sudden you feel like you're forced to suddenly have a political opinion about things. And
Mm.
and then you suddenly wake up and you discover that actually one feels this way and one feels that way, and then you're really triggered by the fact that you feel confronted by the differences, right? If you went into this war
Hmm.
having communicated about these very important things, you're going to be in a much better space. The problem is what happens when you haven't had this opportunity because it just you thought you could maybe live in Israel under a rock and not think about politics. Some people do. Some people do. And God bless them. They've been lucky until now. It's just that now they're really confronted and it's really hard to not think about these things. And so that person really would need a safe space in order to be able to help to lower the trigger. I think doing it on your own would be, I would imagine, it'd be really hard and really confronting, right? Because what's going to happen is they're going to either never talk about these things, which is going to make them go like that, make them fall apart, or they're going to try to have these conversations, but because they don't have space or capacity to hear the other person, because they think that their opinion is right and they don't have the space to hear the other person, there's going to be an explosion.
Is it doable to have vastly different opinions with loved ones and still have the love, respect, and trust?
I wouldn't be able to do my job if I didn't feel that way. I definitely feel that way very strongly. But the question is, the thing is the other person open to hearing the other person? And that's the aim of the game, no matter what the issue is, right? And I've had couples come to me where I haven't been successful with them because one person thinks that their partner needs to just think like them. I'm not going to be very successful in a relationship where one person thinks that they're right and they just need to get the other person on board, because I don't. That really goes against my value system. Because then basically what you're saying is you want to be able to hold the other person captive, and I don't believe that marriage and relationships are about holding people in captivity, as much as
Esther
you know,
Perel, mating in captivity.
Esther Perel says talks about mating in captivity. I don't believe
Yeah,
she means
right,
about holding people hostage.
right.
I believe it's about setting people free and each person being able to be a free individual and have differences of opinion that can coexist, even if they are vastly different, like the one you described before.
So you're saying that, so if a couple is feeling, a couple or somebody in the immediate family or maybe the workplace, that they're feeling really triggered by the other person, how can they
Yeah.
break it down and make it not personalized? What are some tips that you can give and say,
Mm.
like,
Yeah.
how do we divide it into, okay, it's their
Mm.
opinion, they're not Hamas, or that vice versa, it's their opinion. It doesn't mean that they're baby murderers of the entire Gaza.
Right.
Like, how
Right.
do we do that, slowing down and to see the other person versus saying, if you don't
Yeah.
see my value, I can't have a relationship with you, or I can't be close to you
Right.
because we don't value the same
Thing.
values.
I think you really said it right there. It's really about slowing things down and not I think that's the biggest mistake when people have very heated conversations is they get spun out of control because they're doing it so fast. And they think that if they speak really quickly, that they're going to get to the solution faster. And that actually is really the death knell of a relationship, right? Whereas if you slow things down, you notice how you're feeling and really listen to your body, like we were talking about earlier, right? If you're feeling triggered, notice where that trigger is inside of you and ask yourself, what is the trigger really sitting on? What is making you feel so threatened? That just because he thinks black and you think white, that the two can't coexist or you can't create some sort of gray. So it's about really trying to understand what it is that makes you feel so threatened. Is it the way that the person's speaking? Is it reminding you of something that someone did to you before where they just shut you down and didn't hear your opinion? Is it about you feeling that your opinion isn't valid, that there's no space for your opinion? So I'd be asking myself all these kinds of questions and really just try to calm myself down. And that's really the aim of the game in couples therapy is really helping to create a calming space for the couple so that they can then really hear each other. And that happens all the time. A couple will come in and they just revealed something really terrifying. They just discovered something very terrifying that happened in the relationship that they didn't know existed before. And they just feel, oh my God, they feel as if they've just been attacked, but they feel
Mm,
betrayed.
mm,
Right? And so it's about really helping to just create a calm space where everyone could just settle themselves and not feel that they're in a war mode,
mm,
even if you are.
mhm.
Really, that's really what it is. It's really about really just calming the nervous system down,
And then you can work with the entire brain, not just
the chopped off part,
the fight or flight
the
reaction
clear
of,
part. Yeah,
right, of just like
the
reactive.
adaptive brain.
I once
Right.
asked a trauma therapist, what's the difference between trauma reaction and a healthy gut reaction? And how do
Mm,
we know the difference between them? What would you say? Like, how do you
yeah,
know the difference between trauma? But I remember, and I brought this up when Chaim Walder was, I think
yeah.
it's when he died by suicide, and there was the big camaraderie. I didn't know about him before the whole episode. I never heard of him. It's funny, I grew up in
Oh,
Israel and
wow.
never heard of him. But
Yeah,
I remember the camaraderie, and there was a lot of talking about educating our
yeah.
children about abuse and blah, blah, blah. And we have family dinners every night, and there was someone at I don't even remember who it was. And we have a lot of extras at our tables always. Like, I don't, it's not just our core family. There's always someone extra, and there's always
Mm.
a political or drama at the table talking
Oh,
about
yeah,
what
you're
Ben
here.
Shapiro said or what this said, or there's
Yeah.
always like the updates and the mommy that knows
Interview.
nothing. And they always say, I always say, how do you know that happened? If you have a heartbeat, you would know. So maybe check your heartbeat, because I'm so disconnected from the news or whatever. So when it
Yeah,
all came up, of course, I had to address it on the podcast because
yeah.
I just needed to. So I did a little bit of talk. And there was somebody, I don't remember who it was, that was like saying he didn't deserve the death sentence, something like that. He killed
Hmm.
himself about it. Oh my God. They had empathy for him. And I was
Yeah.
thinking, oh my God, what an evil person you are to have empathy for somebody that molested
Mm.
or abused or whatever it was. Yeah. And then right away, I ran into making assumptions about that person.
Mm.
Maybe they're themselves are molesters, maybe they're abusers,
Mm.
like right away. And
Mm.
I literally felt like I couldn't breathe. I couldn't
Oh,
breathe. I was so
mm.
angry. How dare
Yeah.
you? How
Right.
dare you? What kind of person are you? And then I
Yeah,
said to myself, wait, Matana, you're attacking this person for no reason. They just had
right.
an
So something
opinion.
clearly
There was a
got triggered inside of
conversation,
you.
and I had to calm myself down. And then I asked myself, is this a trauma response or is it a gut
Gut
response? Which one
response.
is it? Because I didn't really know. Now I remember that
Yeah.
I didn't know the person very well. I really didn't know the person. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
wait 1 second. Who are you? And maybe we don't know a lot about you. And I should be very skeptical about you. So I was curious. How do we know the difference between a gut response and a trauma response?
That's a really good question. I think a trauma response is a response that's a kind of knee-jerk reaction that you don't where you realize you're not really fully using your whole brain. I'll give you a great example. All these wonderful people right now who are running around like crazy Michiganas trying to do all this volunteer work. There are some people out there that are like that, especially immediately after. That was a trauma response to the war. They were running around making sandwiches, tying tzitzis, and trying to make tons of cookies and tons of this. And I almost got into this myself. I noticed myself doing this
Which
because I
is
felt
normal because people
right,
wanted to say, I'm not at the front line. I can't really do something. So how can I be part of serving and be a part of saving our country and
lives
the
or whatever.
world? Yeah.
Helplessness. It was about dealing with helplessness.
Right.
And I noticed myself, I was feeling helpless because I mean, even though I'm very blessed, I didn't have anybody from my immediate family, although I have obviously extended people, but my immediate family was not in the war. And I felt like I needed to do something because I can. And so a lot of people were doing this kind of thing, but like in really crazy, frantic extreme ways. So I calmed that down. I noticed that in myself. And I said to myself, hang on a minute. Let me just try to think. If I just act like a crazy person, I'm going to be useless. I'm going to go into some sort of shock mode or shutdown because I'm not looking after myself. And so I calmed myself down and I said to myself, hang on a minute. I want to feel useful. I want to feel like I'm doing something for this war. What is my skill set? What can I do? And when I was
Mhm.
able to calm myself down, and really listen to myself, that's where I got to the place of maybe I can help people with my therapy because that's something I'm actually good at and trained at. And I know that it actually helps. And that's where I came to the idea of creating these support groups and volunteering therapy for people who needed it. And when I was able to do that, I was in a much, much better place because I was much calmer. I was sleeping better. I knew that I was doing the right thing. I felt it in my kishkas. I felt it in my blood that was what I was meant to be doing. So that's the difference, I think, between a trauma response and a gut response, where you
And
really
what
are.
would be a gut response? I'm just not feeling what does a gut response do that's different than a trauma? It's a sensical, it's
It's
more
got,
grounded.
it's grounded, it's using your full brain, it's looking after you. It's
Mm,
nourishing you and looking after you. And it's saying, what can you do that doesn't feel like you're hyperextending yourself?
mm, mm,
What do you feel that you're doing that is within your bounds? That's not going to make you crazy or make you lose your nut,
mm.
that kind of thing. Yeah, it's
Interesting.
powerful.
Very interesting. Yeah. So we're coming to wrap up now.
So
I want,
fast.
yeah, I know we could do a few more series. What I wanted to ask you is, I saw that you were also doing like this. What if somebody knows that they have something in their body, like
Yeah,
constant tension, either in their stomach? By me, it's over here in my neck. I'm always,
yeah,
I have no idea what I have here, but for years,
yeah,
since I'm like 12, here, and I always imagine Play-Doh softening, and I go with my mind. I like sometimes it's becoming butter, and it's just like relaxing, and
mm,
maybe even feeling that lick like of a release. And often like anxiety is in my chest, literally in my chest. I feel like I can't breathe, but I'm very good with breathing. It's
mm,
my power tool. I use it all the time when I feel
mm,
anxious. My kids even know mommy's going into breathing for 2, 5, 3, whatever minutes, maybe 10, maybe 15. I just calm my nervous system with my breath.
yeah,
I always say God gives it to us for free. Let's tap into it. It's such a powerful tool. But that's where
absolutely.
I feel like if it's too much here, I just go into breathing. And also my stomach always feel like when I'm anxious, it feels like in a knot. So I don't even know what, maybe it's a collective of anxiety or stuff or fear or
Sure.
whatever in
Mm,
life. But how do we figure out what is really going on? If we're like, if I come to a somatic therapist, can I come with something that's not working
just
and
the
say, "Figure
symptoms.
it out"?
Just yeah, absolutely. Just bring your symptoms with.
Hmm.
Just share your symptoms and then see what pops up.
And it can, and if it's, you said the layers, there's the big T, the big traumas or the small
Yes.
traumas. So
Mhm.
with that treatment, you
It's
can.
like peeling an onion. You'll just see the outer layers just fall off, and they just come off, and they come off, and they come off.
Hmm.
And that's really what
So if someone's curious about this, they would say, okay, the peeling of the onion. Let's say I would come to you for the neck. for
Mm.
example, and say, let me figure out. And then the neck doesn't hurt, by the way. The neck is loose forever, or I learn how
It'll take some
to. So if somebody's saying I'm coming for something, let's say it's an intimacy thing, let's say it's a relationship, somebody's single that is stuck, they feel like they're not moving forward with dating. They feel like they're always getting stuck in the same place. So they come to you. They want to know what does it look like? Sessions with you. How long is it months? Is it years? Is it a few sessions? How long is every session? You work on Zoom and in
really
private,
varies.
right? Okay.
Both Zoom and in my office. This is my office. Take a little look around. Yeah, it really depends on how long the trauma has been persisting for. Sexual traumas will take often a lot longer, unless it's been a shock trauma like a rape and it happened very recently. Then it's a little bit easier to heal. But if it's a trauma that's sitting on other trauma, it'll take a while longer. But as I say, with these shock traumas that I'm dealing with from the war, 2, 3 sessions, I worked with a woman who was struggling to get out of her house,
Mm,
and she came to me because I worked with a friend of hers who had a birth trauma. And so I worked with her. She literally went from not being able to leave her house to being able to, within 3 sessions, she's able to drive everywhere. She's able to walk everywhere. She was able to drive everywhere. The first session, I got her to leave her house and go to pick up her children from the creche across the street. And the next session was going that little bit further. I literally would had her in her mind going for a walk a little bit further down and seeing where the trauma was sitting, and walking her through that. And so 3 sessions we were done, because it wasn't sitting on too much. It was actually sitting on a previous trauma that we managed to heal, that was from 6 months earlier, but we were able to clear it out very quickly.
and what about, like, childhood trauma for adults? Like,
That's
something like abuse, abandonment, what that can be, like,
so so a
month, a
shock
year?
trauma so a shock trauma like the one I just described from the war, something from the immediate, but
Mhm,
exactly what it's from and when it's from, and it's very easy to describe, that'll take just a few sessions. A developmental trauma takes a lot longer. It could take several months to a year or more,
mm,
depending on how many different ways it's morphed and what you want to achieve, what you want to really feel. Because
mm.
the client, at the end of the day, they're the ones that dictate when they feel better.
Starting to peel the onions.
Mm,
Is it a hard experience because you're basically confronting the trauma head on, right?
mm,
There's no
yeah,
just like analyzing it slowly. You're really like going right into it. So,
yeah.
let's say you're working with somebody with childhood trauma
Mm.
and they're unraveling it. What happens for the first 10 sessions, for example, in between them? How are they functioning in their lives?
Hopefully they'll be functioning a little bit better than what they were beforehand.
Mm,
Because if they come to me and they aren't functioning so well, if they aren't having a good relationship with their husband as a result, or they're not able to connect with their children, or
mm,
they're not able to work, or
mm,
they're not able to get out of bed, everything's relative. So hopefully you'll be able to see like little markers of what it is that they're doing. Well, with a person who's not able to leave their home, what I'm doing is I'm literally helping them like walk through, what is it like to leave the door? What is it like to go through the building? What is it like to go across the street? And
mm,
I'm seeing what they're feeling in their body. And they're literally measuring how big is the tension inside of their body. I'll ask them, maybe on a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, how big is the trauma? And I'm trying to get them down from a 10 to a 2,
mm,
right? Where at the end, they don't even know that they ever felt anything.
mm,
This client who I saw for 3, 4 sessions, it's like she looks back to when she first started seeing me, just like a week or two after the war, and she said, "I can't believe I ever found it hard to leave my door. I can't believe I
really?
couldn't leave my house,
Mm,
and now I'm driving around. I'm taking my kids everywhere. I'm visiting friends. I'm going for walks. I'm going shopping. I'm being a normal functioning person."
mm.
And she can't believe that just a few weeks ago, she literally could not leave her house. Yeah.
Do they find that it works also with OCD, with treating OCD, depression? I was wondering if it can treat also extreme OCD or even depression. Can
Yeah.
you treat them?
Absolutely. They all have symptoms, right? Depression. The symptom, there's so many depression symptoms. It's about identifying what is the symptom that the person is struggling with, that they want to be different. If it's feeling that fog in the brain, not being able to get out of bed, not being able to function, feeling like you're not working at your full capacity.
Or what about deep sadness? Like
Just
deep
the deep sadness,
sadness,
right?
like severe depression that
Yeah.
you can't get out of bed, you have no motivation to
Yeah.
speak, to eat, to do anything. It can also
Right.
help with that.
Yeah. It's seeing
Oh,
what that sadness is sitting on and helping to release it, helping to
And it's
create the corrective
always
story.
sitting on something. It's always.
That's what my experience has been. Yeah,
Mm.
there's always something. It might take
Wow.
some time to get there. It might take some
Wow.
time to get there, but we
Mm.
get there
Wow,
with as
that's so
long as we're God and
fascinating
open
to
to
me.
be.
It's
Yeah,
really fascinating to me because
yeah,
I'm thinking back to my years of depression 13 years ago. I did a lot of traditional therapy at the time, and we couldn't come up with anything specific that it's like that is creating the depression. When I remember my years of depression and I went through a tremendous amount of traditional therapy, they
yeah,
couldn't figure, there was nothing that it was sitting on. It was completely a hormonal imbalance that of course was sitting on some kind of deep-rooted belonging or something like that, but that wasn't a trauma. It was I understood myself better once I unpacked it, but it wasn't a trauma. And the depression was brutal to a sense
yeah,
that I didn't want to live. It just I couldn't imagine there was nothing that my mind can think
yeah.
of that will bring me any relief. Nothing. What if it's not on a trauma? What if it's not sitting on something? It could be a hormonal imbalance, a chemical imbalance.
I find that hard to believe, I gotta tell you, because generally speaking, a hormonal imbalance, it's all connected to the body, right? And so there must be something that was causing the hormones to go out of whack. And it could have been something, maybe you treated it in a hormonal way with drugs or something like this. I'm not sure. And a lot of talk therapy. But my belief, obviously we can't turn back time,
Mhm.
and I'm sure you wouldn't want to either. Generally speaking, you could find something that it would be sitting on.
I
Yeah.
remember just trying and I was like, God, just give me anything that will give me a relief. Yes, of course I did medication and I did it all. It was an I have an episode called describing my I called it the hormonal overdose because I did overdose on hormones in order to prevent my period from coming because I was traveling and I had
Oh,
early ovarian failure and I didn't even know about it. I was just medicating myself just in order not to get my period and my body couldn't tolerate it. And
and do it.
many bodies can't tolerate hormones in
Yeah,
general. I was
yeah,
always very like sensitive to hormones, but to overdose just because I wanted to avoid period, which after I released my episode, a lot of people are like, "Oh my God, I'm not the only one," and thank you for sharing. And wow, maybe that's what I'm going through. We underestimate what hormones do to our minds and our
for
bodies.
sure.
So I did have to balance that. And then there were small things that came up, which are not small
Mm,
because it shifted my life. But at the
yeah,
time, I wonder if I would be able to even say, where is my sadness? Where's my pain? Where is it? I wonder.
yeah,
I'm curious to know. I'm really curious to know. But for other
yeah,
people, because since this is a mental health podcast, there's a lot of depression, anxiety,
yeah,
OCD, and many others. And I'm wondering
yeah,
if it can help with all of them, because I'm sure people are going to be wondering
sure.
and curious.
Absolutely, absolutely. And oftentimes those other mental illnesses are getting in the way of their ability to feel good about themselves, to establish a relationship with other people, to function in the best way and be their best selves.
Mm,
And so once they're able to really release themselves from the trauma that's been sitting inside their bodies for so long, it helps them make better decisions about relationships. It helps them make better decisions about what they want to do with their lives, how they want to be in this world, and it helps them just to feel really like their best, highest selves.
mm. I would love to
Absolutely.
have you on again on the
Thank you.
topic of how can we be a supporter to a loved one. Let's say we got married, happy go lucky, everything's okay, and then
Mm.
somebody one of the partners go into depression or anxiety or something
Oh,
that
yeah.
wasn't before. How
Yeah.
do we, as the caretaker, not lose ourselves and have still the strength to continue and
Yeah.
not have that shame part of, am I the good partner? Am I not loving properly? Because
Mm.
it could be huge to be a caretaker of somebody that's going through mental
Yeah.
illness for both of them. I always say we give a lot of
Yes.
spotlight to the one that's struggling with a mental illness. What about the
Right.
partner?
Absolutely. Yeah. I see that a lot.
I would love to discuss that because I think we need to give a little bit of space for the partners that are living with somebody that's going
Yeah.
through mental illness experience or long-term mental illness, and how do they deal with it?
Yeah. It's not easy.
It's not
It's
easy.
definitely not easy. I definitely take my hat off to those people. They're both, obviously, they're both struggling because the person with the mental illness feels so much guilt and shame that they're holding things back and they're not able to be intimate as much as they'd like, and they're not able to be fun and light and romantic and all that. And
Or
the
be anything,
or
or just
be anything. Right,
talkative, or show up,
right.
or not interested in.
And the other partner, the one who is not suffering with mental illness, let's
Mhm.
say, at that point anyway, feels a lot of resentment and anger and frustration. And why can't he or she just get themselves together and pull themselves out of this funk and their bodies work? And it's so hard to see mental illness as an illness. If the God forbid had cancer or a physical illness, it's somehow in I think it's society culturally
It has more empathy.
you could give more empathy to that's broken. If a person, has a broken leg, oh, they can't do it because their leg just doesn't work, as opposed to seeing that the brain isn't working the way that it needs to, and it's just affecting their entire system.
I was just at a retreat for aphasia for stroke
Mm.
survivors, and
Well,
my hat went off for the supporters because it's hell to lose
yeah,
your speech, your ability to read or write. It's hell. But also, how much empathy and sympathy do we need for the caretaker? We call
yes.
them the caretakers, the supporters, because they need to have so much patience
Mm,
and just to relive living with somebody that they didn't know how to live with that person. And it can get exhausting. As much as you could see it, it gets exhausting. And I think there needs to be more conversation about that, how we get through it and what would we do in order to support properly for both sides.
that's exactly it. Yes.
Mickey, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
What a powerful conversation. It's a big topic. We spoke about a big
Yeah,
topic. I usually don't bring up these big topics.
juicy.
Like, I think Chaim Walder was a big topic that we brought up. I'm trying to think what another big topic that was like, it could be heavy, but I see that our community likes these topics and they're curious and they want to know and they want to evolve and they could take it well. So thank you for joining me here. I
Yeah.
really appreciate it, and good luck with everybody and with all your incredible work you're doing for the world and for the Chayalim and their family. Kol hakavod, and thank you. Thank you so much, Mickey.
Thank you.
Bye till next time. Thank you for listening till the end. We highly appreciate all of our listeners. And Mental Health Together is better. You being here means a tremendous amount to us. If you enjoyed this episode and you would like some extra boost of information and inspiration that is not on the podcast, you can go to our website, hopetorecharge.com. There's some premium content that for the cost of a cup of coffee, you can download some amazing information that will help you, a tool that will guide you through life. So don't skip a beat. Don't hesitate. Go to hopetorecharge.com and see what other offerings we have there for your mental health well-being. Thank you for joining us. And remember, if you enjoyed this and you want to say thank you, the best way of gratitude will be by you leaving a review or a comment or sharing this with a loved one. There is no greater form of gratitude for us. Thank you. Bye till next time.
Looking to reduce your anxiety and stress, relax your muscles, or get a better night's sleep? Check out Maxifies.com, 100% legal hemp, where you can find doctor-formulated, lab-certified, high-quality CBD oils, tinctures, and other items, cultivated, grown, harvested, and packaged in the United States, and available in different sizes and strength formulas. Check out Maxifies.com, that's MAXIFYZ.com, and use coupon code HOPE to get 10% off your order plus free shipping. That's Maxifies.com.